Hello there. Today I wanted to look at a long-standing Australian brand. This is Penfolds Bin 28 Shiraz, and it's the 2022 vintage of that. And this is a South Australian blend. So Bin 28 was one of the original bin range of wines marketed by Penfolds, a range established in 1959. At that stage, it was entirely from a vineyard called Kalimna in the Barossa Valley. It was a single vineyard, single varietal wine, Shiraz. The vineyard was a long-established vineyard that had been bought in 1945 by Penfolds, and it was old, it was unirrigated, there were bush vines, and the Shiraz there gave wonderful concentrated flavours. And that's why very often fruit from Kalimna used to find its way into the Grange blend, which is Penfolds' flagship wine. However, these days, this has become a South Australian blend, and I think 2018 was the last vintage that carried the name Kalimna on the label. So the fact that this is a South Australian blend, I think, typifies the fact that Penfolds have been able to make use of some of the newer, high-quality wine-producing regions that have been planted in South Australia since the inception of this range. I mean, for instance, some of the fruit for this comes from Padthaway. First vines were planted there in 1964, and another portion comes from Wrattonbully, which is in the Limestone Coast, and vines weren't planted there until 1998. I think also Bin 28 now demonstrates one of the approaches that the Australian wine industry has to winemaking, where it differs from more traditional European approaches, in that here the winemaker as the blender has more of an influence than that of an individual place, a terroir. And certainly the idea of the winemaker being the most important influence on the style of wine is one that has been very important at Penfolds. One fabulous historical figure in Penfolds' heritage was their chief winemaker Max Schubert, the man who created Grange, the man who created the Bin series of wines. And he'd actually started with the company in 1931 as a messenger boy. He trained to be a winemaker, and by 1948 he was their chief winemaker, working for the company until 1975, during which time he created such brands as Grange, Bin 707, Bin 28, Bin 389. So as I say, this is no longer from the Kalimna vineyard. It's no longer a single vineyard wine. It's no longer even a single regional wine. While Penfolds have tried to maintain the style of this as being along the lines of a Barossa Shiraz. In fact, in 2022, I believe there was more fruit in this from the McLaren Vale than from Barossa. And along with the McLaren Vale and Barossa fruit, as I say, there was fruit from Padthaway and Wrattonbully. 2022 was quite a cool growing season, and the grapes were able to ripen relatively slowly in the warm areas such as the Barossa Valley and the McLaren Vale. There were some issues in Padthaway where there had been some frost early in the season. And then in Wrattonbully, they had excessive rain to the extent where it was something like nearly 50% up on average during the period April to October. However, they were still able to find some small plots that hadn't been affected by the humidity. Now, this is a blend, as I say, from 4 different regions. So to define the winemaking in a particular way is probably incorrect, because I'm assuming that this will have been made in more than one location. Certainly the technical sheets I've seen don't give much detail. They talk about temperature control in stainless steel tanks. The practice of winemaking at Penfolds is to cascade quality down the tiers, so they will blend their top wines first and allow some of the wines that might have gone into those to cascade down into other brands. It's not impossible also that some fruits that had originally been intended for lower quality wines might have been upgraded to the blend for Kalimna if it was good enough. Certainly it's not impossible in a slightly more difficult year like 2022. Certainly though, all the wine will have aged for 12 months in barrel. The barrels used were American oak hogsheads, and my understanding was that all or most of them will have been seasoned oak, so there shouldn't be too much obvious oak influence. So let's see what we make of the wine, shall we? The first impression I have is of a deep, dark, opaque, almost sort of black purple. It's a reddish purple, it's not a purple with a blue hint. As I swirl it, the wine is noted as having 14.5% on its label. It's staining the glass, it's forming tears that are running quite readily down the sides of the glass. It appears to be a viscous wine. I'm expecting it to be fairly powerful. So let's see what we make of the aromas. The aromas have a number of aspects. There are some lifted, slightly minty, slightly eucalypt notes. There's some fairly obvious vanilla with hints of cedar. And then also there's some juicy, ripe black fruit. Juicy black cherry, blackcurrant lozenge, that sort of really quite clean, quite intense, quite focused fruit. So let's have a taste. The wine is juicy, it's medium to full bodied. Its structure becomes evident quite quickly, but the tannins are actually quite velvety smooth. There's a sort of a cocoa powder drying note on them, but they're not harsh, they're not astringent. There's a chocolatey texture, there's a rich sort of licoricey, sweet licorice sort of core, surrounded by black fruit. Now there's warming alcohol, but actually it's being balanced by the quite juicy black cherry, blackberry fruit on the mid palate there. And surprisingly, although it's not coming through as a very acidic wine, there's quite a lovely sort of mouth-watering note on the sides of the tongue there. And that's where I'm sort of seeing actually what seems like cassis sort of like perfume, and then juicy black cherry notes. Some quite lively fruit, and I suppose actually slightly the warmth on the back palate is showing a little bit of the cedar and spice. There's maybe a slightly peppery note to the wine, but also from the oak you've got vanilla notes, you've got cinnamon, and you've got cedar. And that vanilla and cedar is evident right onto the finish, where you see it very well integrated with some lovely juicy black cherry fruit. The wine is rich and warming. Its concentration, its acidity, and its rich alcohol suggest that it should age quite nicely. I'd certainly think 5 or 6 years, probably 10, and I've seen critics who suggest that this would probably age for 20 years. And I don't think I'd argue with them, actually. I think this is a wine that has the ability to age. But I also think you have to ask, does it really need to? Because although it has a good structure, it's not particularly astringent. Those tannins don't need to soften, especially if you were eating this with a rich meat dish. A classic combination for an Australian Shiraz might be something like kangaroo. Venison would be another good match. This would be perfect to drink now. A famous Australian brand for a company with a reputation for quality that delivers opulence, richness, and I think pretty reasonable value for money. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, it would be fantastic if you could subscribe to our channel. That way you can set yourself an alert and you can be warned every time we publish a new video tasting. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, we'd really love the endorsement of you forwarding it to them if you felt you could do that. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please pop those in the feedback box below. We would really like to know what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. I will leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, and that will enable you to follow that and to find out where this wine's available, what its pricing is, and then using the tabs at the top of that page you can look at things like the region it's from, grape variety, more of the background of the producer. You can see any winemaking notes we've got. You can see what notes and scores we have from critics, any awards that it's won. You can compare it to other vintages. You can look at its price history. So we've tried to combine everything there to give you everything you need to make an informed decision about buying this wine. So hopefully that's of use to you too. But if you get the time, it'd be fantastic to see you back here for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.